Hi, everybody. Eric Bailey, Eli Letterman, back again this week for Oklahoma Talk. We still haven't named this, Eli. I guess the world's greatest OU sports podcast. We're still looking for a name out there
Something
too.
like that.
Still
Yeah, we
looking for,
gotta.
still looking for a sponsor too. So if you want to sponsor Eli and me, that'd be great. We'll come and clean the windows, vacuum the rugs, whatever you need.
We'll work for the money. There's no
We'll
doubt
work for
about
the
it.
money, yeah. So, just a fun day, Eli. It's crazy how life never slows down with OU athletics, and it's
Mm-mm.
a crazy week again this week.
It has been. I mean, we're kind of jam packed in that part of the year where the spring sports have started, the winter sports are headed to their finish line. Whether you're talking about hoops, gymnastics will get there, wrestling's headed that way. We've got all that in Tulsa. And then there's things that just never sleep. I mean, you wrote yesterday on Joe Castiglione's comments on the radio in Norman, and that's I think going to kind of be part of our reality from now until we get to the SEC. Or little things are going to trickle out, and there's just so many factors and angles and things for us to talk about, for folks like Joe Castiglione, I guess, to think about first and then talk about. There's a lot going on in Norman, I guess, per usual. But do you want to start with Joe C and some of what he had to say yesterday?
Yeah, he had a 20-minute conversation with Toby Rowland, and it was really interesting because they hit a lot of different topics. And, the big thing, of course, everyone wants to talk about the move to the SEC, and he hasn't talked to anyone about that publicly. So since that move, we've seen Chris Del Conde, the Texas athletic director, go out a couple times and talk. And some of the things that interested me were some of the talking points. I basically were how this happened, and he said it was important for six different factors to be work in concert. The Fox, of course, ESPN, OU, Texas, the Big 12. Who am I leaving out? OU, Texas, Big 12, Fox, ESPN. Who am I leaving out?
TV networks.
TV
I
network.
think
Yeah,
you
yeah.
pretty much got it. SEC.
The SEC, of course. Yeah. So
They're pretty important in this
yeah,
area.
exactly. So they all had to come together, and he made it sound like the Big 12, they wanted this to happen. In Oklahoma, he made a point to make sure that people knew Oklahoma wasn't looking to get out. They were looking to finish this out. And he even said, unlike other schools, because we've seen other schools depart conferences early and with purpose trying to get out. Oklahoma, Texas sounds like they were willing to stay until 2025. It worked out for both parties that 2024 would work good. And I just thought it was interesting to see that he's the way his voice was in terms of just wanting to make sure that people knew they wanted to stay, but this was an effort that worked out for everyone.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure they were willing to stay through the contracts. I'm sure there was some eagerness to get to the SEC. What was interesting to me was, him talking about the process, that, something I'd been told that led me to believe that they would have been fine sticking around until 2025. I heard this in Kansas City during the Big 12 hoops in October. Was we all focus on football, we focus on the teams, but in terms of the infrastructure of this move, there is so much that is going to go into this when it comes to facilities, when it comes to staff, all that it made sense, to have that runway to 2025. And that's what jumped out to me among a lot of other things when this did get pushed up to 24, was they're going to have to accelerate a lot of that. And Joe C hit on that a bit yesterday, of that they're already kind of, the wheels are spinning already on that, of what they've got to do, because there is a lot of work to be done between right now and that arrival to the SEC. And no shock, the fact that they were sort of in progress already, probably anticipating, once they knew they were in these negotiations, that this could be the reality, speeding that clock up. But the whole 24, 25 thing will, I think, as he put it, mutually beneficial is where they ended up there.
I thought it was interesting too, Eli, when he talked about just simple things you don't think about, with like changing the logo at every
The
facility.
logos.
I mean, that's something minor that, we don't think about, but it's something that he has to think about, going to the soccer fields and changing the Big 12 logos, the SEC and such. So there's a lot of big ticket items and in terms of, football and what they have to do for football, but little things like that, just changing logos. And, it sounds like they had a transitional team in place and a lot of subcommittees that have talked about what they need to do, what has to happen. And now that just gets ramped up. It gits accelerated because it's a year earlier. So everyone's going to be going 100 miles an hour for that 2024 start to the SEC. So I like you said, the process is going to be interesting. It's something we're going to have to follow from a media standpoint, because there's going to be news happening all the time. Anything little that happens is going to be big for Oklahoma, because it means this is part of their new life. This is part of their new home. So they're going to really be following everything with the SEC. One thing that he did talk about was OU Texas, both schools going to the SEC. I thought it was interesting. He kind of agreed with Chris Del Conte, his counterpart at Texas, how this game, he expects it to be 2:30. He would love for it to be in that 2:30 window. We've seen multiple 11 a.m. starts for OU Texas. I think 2:30 would be good for fans. It's good for football, and it's where this game used to be played. So I'm all in for a 2:30 start. What about you, Eli?
I'd like 2:30. That's more time for us at the fairground. We can play some games, eat some fried anything. Like that part I like. And we talked about this before we jumped on here, but most interesting. All right, 11 a.m., 2:30. We know that game because they played it that way. Always, it's always in the daylight. And Joe Seed, essentially said it's going to stay that way. The quote: "Now, one thing that we've said forever is we won't move that game to prime time. That's just not going to happen. There's too much going on around the state fair to play that game at night. So it has to be 11 or 2:30." And I think that's interesting. There would be an obvious push from I think a lot of logical minds to say put that at night, make it a prime time game. But gosh, this move in its own right is smashing up some tradition for the sake of money to a certain degree. Let's keep if we can keep something sacred in this world. I think a daytime Red River rivalry has to stay, because I just think that's iconic to me. I mean, we've talked about me growing up on the East Coast and watching OU Texas from there. It's always been a day game at the Cotton Bowl, and that to me that's not getting swallowed up in this is a good thing.
The only time I think we'll see a radical change for this is if the game is actually moved out of the Cotton Bowl, moved to AT&T Stadium. Then I could automatically see in that being a primetime game. That being said, I know both parties and both fan bases are going to do everything they can, and the city of Dallas, to keep that game at the Cotton Bowl. And tradition, we need to maintain traditions. I think that game belongs in the Cotton Bowl. 90,000 fans, half and half. I mean, I'm hopeful for that 2:30 start, and we'll see what happens with the SEC. We'll see what happens with windows, with TV contracts, with ESPN. What does ESPN want to do? What kind of games do they want to have? So it's going to be interesting to see how this is going forward. And it's also interesting to see, with all the rivalries in the SEC too, where this is going to weigh. I mean, it's going to be that Auburn, Alabama, we look at all these different rivalries, even LSU, Arkansas too. There's rivalries about just abundant amount of rivalries. So OU Texas is going to fit right into the SEC.
It'll fall, right in. You think about the Iron Bowl, you think about Florida, Georgia, you think about even, smaller ones, not on, maybe on our right, or at least not yet, but, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, the Egg Bowl.
Yeah.
The SEC is chock full of them, and they're about to get one of college football's best. Their lineup of rivalry games, however they choose to do it, maybe they'll, somewhere down the line, stack them, have OU Texas kick off at 11, have the Iron Bowl at 2:30 and another one at night. That sounds like a made for TV event to me. But OU and Texas are going to fall right in there.
It's funny too, because, one thing that Joe Castiglione didn't make a strong comment on was, will the SEC go to 8 or 9 conference games? He kind of was just like Brent Venables. Brent Venables kind of push that question aside. They're not going to make public any of their thoughts on what this should be. They're just going to let it all play out at spring meetings. So we'll see what happens with 8 or 9 games for conference play coming up in the SEC. And then one last thing that he did confirm that Kyler Murray's statue unveiling will be during the spring game on April 22nd, which kicks off at what time?
2:30. 2:30.
2:30. Yeah. So and that was exciting, Eli. Just what's your thoughts on last year's with Baker Mayfield, and what do you anticipate this year?
Well, Joe C said it. He said, I think everyone surprised themselves last year in terms of how cool the Baker unveiling was. It happened to line up with all the energy that was surrounding Brent Venables' first spring game. They packed that place. They hope to do that again, but I think that set up 2:30 kick. You'd guess there's a Kyler Murray ceremony somewhere. If it follows anything like last year, a ceremony pregame perhaps, and then something at halftime, and I think that'll be cool. I think they realized last year that if you can combine those two turnouts together, you get a pretty special day. And I don't know that many schools did a better spring game. And again, we'll see if that energy is matched. There's a lot of I think as much Brent Venables there was Lincoln Riley energy last year. Let's see if it carries over to the spring of 2023. One other note that I just thought was interesting, and it's not. I don't think. I think as Joe C said, it's really not not their number one priority. But there was the discussion about expanding the stadium. 100,000 seater to fit into the SEC, and I think Eric, you and I have certainly been in arenas or stadiums that are too big and not full, and the feelings of those. But it doesn't sound like for OU and for Joe C that's priority number one. I think for them it's about making the stadium they've got now and the experience they've got now as good as it can be. And even demographically, a lot of people were pointing out the population of the state of Oklahoma, 100,000 people out of what, 3.5 million, something like that. Those numbers don't quite line up. But I just thought, I think those are certain things that if we're taking a non-traditional SEC school and throwing them, in the snap of a finger, essentially now into the SEC and whatever quote unquote standards there, you're going to have discussions like that. And I think that's where Oklahoma is going to have to kind of pick and choose of where are they going to be an SEC school and where are they going to stay Oklahoma and the program they've been, the school they've been.
That's a great point. Yeah, they want to keep their own name out there. This is Oklahoma football. What's impressed me about Joe Castiglione when we talk stadium expansion, when we talk these topics, is his first concern is the fan experience. He wants to make sure the fan experience is great. I don't think it's quality over quantity. I don't think he gets caught up in seeing 100,000 fans at different stadiums. So although, you never know, down the road, there may be an opportunity it may be warranted that, more seats need to be put in, but it's almost an idea. Let's see what happens in the early years of the SEC, and we'll go from there. And that's not to say they're not progressive thinking. I mean, all you got to do is look at the football facility they're going to build.
They're not building. I promise you that.
Exactly. So I mean, that's the thing. They're always thinking ahead. They're always looking forward. So that's not something that's going to be ignored in the future. So
and one more just on the SEC scheduling, the 8-9 games.
Yeah,
we're talking about like a landscape shifting move, OU and Texas to the SEC, hundreds of $1 million on the line, all that. And the biggest bit of debate and drama we're going to have like the next few months is whether they're going, it's about scheduling. The dorkiest stuff on the planet of, 4 non-con games, 3 non-con games. And there are all these different models. If you're interested, you can find people who've been writing about all the different ways they could break it up. Eric, you and I might dive into that at a certain point, but there's some irony there for as big a move as this is. What they're really, I think the number one thing on the docket is 8 or 9, and there are obviously clear and big ramifications of either decision. But that's going to be a storyline to follow here in the spring as we kind of talk about those storylines where OU's not in the SEC yet, but SEC storylines are about to start impacting OU.
And you're right. We'll hit that more and more as we get closer to spring meetings. I mean, and there's so many different topics you can think about that. I mean, traditionally, you look at SEC, they've always had 8. I mean, you're breaking tradition. But then again, if they go to one division of football, you probably need another point, a data point, a 9th game, so you can help break up, any ties or anything like that. So that's important. And I'll be honest with you, OU Texas has to stay among those natural rivalries, but who else is Oklahoma going to get looped in with? I would love, and this is just me, I would love to see OU Arkansas be an annual game. Just because of proximity, because they haven't played. It'd be a new rivalry that could be created. We saw basketball, how big that was with OU Arkansas. I think OU Arkansas football would be huge. They haven't played since the Cotton Bowl in the early 2000s. So I think the 2001 season. So I just think that, yeah, we'll talk a lot more about OU football and their natural rivalries, but it's good. And that just it's just like a precursor to how important this is going to be moving forward.
We have a date yet for those spring meetings? I looked them up and I got the Securities and Exchange Commission.
I know you get Washington and DC. No, spring meetings for SEC are last week of May. I think May 30th through the June the 2nd, I believe. Last week of May, first week of June in Destin, Florida. So that'll be the next dates for OU fans to circle, just for news coming for OU SEC.
So that's enough about OU and Texas in the future. Let's talk. It's Friday morning. Let's talk about OU Texas in the near term, which is the big game tomorrow afternoon at Lloyd Noble Center. Tied atop the Big 12 standings, OU and Texas. We're kind of in these final stages. It's a big one.
first place on the line, and this is big for Oklahoma, who haven't won the Big 12, who hasn't won the Big 12, and since 2009, this is their first chance to win a conference title. And if they win this game, they're in the driver's seat going into the final season or final week of the season. I just thought it was interesting. We had a chance to talk to Jenny Baranczyk on Wednesday, and I kind of threw her a softball. I admit I threw her a softball pitch, and she hit it out of the ballpark. I asked her what kind of crowd does she expect on Saturday, and she basically challenged OU fans. He said, there should be 8 to 10,000 at least in this game. I mean, we're going to find out. Her words were, "We're going to find out how important women's basketball is in the state of Oklahoma by this game," which has the setup for two first teams tied for first, a natural rivalry. It's the next to last home game for probably one of the most exciting senior classes Oklahoma has had in a while. So much on the line. Baranczyk understands that there's high school basketball games going on Saturday. She gets it, but still, she thinks there should be a really healthy crowd in Norman for this basketball game. And we'll see. It's going to be a great game. Oklahoma, lost down in Austin, really wasn't competitive in that game down in Austin in a 20-point loss. But now this team's playing really, really well. They've won 6 in a row, and so we'll see what happens going forward. And I know, Eli, you're going to be covering the game, so it's going to be fun seeing. Yeah, I'll promise you, it's going to be fun seeing this team go up and down the court.
I'm really looking forward to it. I'll say this: I've been told covering the men's team all year. People in my Twitter mentions, people emailing saying, "Well, if there were a good basketball team at Lloyd Noble Center, we'd show up." There's a pretty damn good basketball team that's got a huge game tomorrow. So I on that front of the challenge that Jenny Baranczyk kind of gave to the fan base, I don't think there's really any excuse tomorrow. Plays better, should be packed, and I'm looking forward to being there after tomorrow. I mean, you said, if they win, puts them in the driver's seat.
Yeah,
it's then they host Kansas State next Wednesday.
And then Bedlam. I guess.
And then Bedlam, which, man, that's going to be a dicey one up at Gallagher-Iba. They've got the Fighting JC Hoyts have been, I think, exceeded just about everybody's expectations.
20 win season, and they beat Iowa State.
Remarkable.
It's crazy. And no one knew what to expect when she got there. You're right. Exceeding expectations is crazy. Came out of Kansas City. She had success at Kansas City, and you really got to give her a lot of credit, because there's no resources at Kansas City. She did, but she won basketball games, and that tells you what kind of coach she was there. And gosh, that's going to be a big time game too. 2 of the last 3 games against rivals.
That's big, and like you said, what's on the line? We're talking about a first regular season title since 2009. And I'll ask you this, Eric: do you think, we're right here? If all goes well for OU, they'll take this. You think Jenny Baranczyk could have seen this coming this fast for them, and from when she stepped in 2021?
I think that's a good question.
It's probably a better question for her. I asked it to you.
But that's a really good question, because that's a tough deal. That was an Oklahoma program that was hurting, and she would not have taken the job if she didn't think she could improve it. And she did 2 20-win seasons. A top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament last year to host. I think she probably really truly believed that she could win, and was probably delighted when she met Maddie Williams and Taylor Robertson. And unfortunately, Anna Lanusa was injured early last year. But I think when she saw the roster she inherited, she built around it, and now she's recruiting to it. So I just think that's huge. So great coach. I mean, it's got to be one of the top contenders for Big 12 Coach of the Year with what they've done this year. Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about the men's program. Just hurting. I mean, it's become like a broken record, Eli. When we talk about, they show signs, you think they got a chance, and then last 5 minutes of the game appears, and I think the whole arena knows what's going to happen, and just another tough loss this week.
So we recorded this last podcast last week. It was after the K-State win, and it was before they went to Austin. And in Austin, they played, that would have been their best win of the season. They took number 6 Texas at Moody Center to the wire. I mean, you had Sam Godwin inches away from sending it to double overtime. That had the feeling at that point, and that shot is even in the air, if you want to look at it that way, of maybe the inflection point for OU. If they'd gone down to Texas and beaten them, I don't know what they needed to do, what they would have needed to do these next few weeks, but that was the start of it. That run we had been talking about it was right there. It was knock off Kansas State and go beat Texas. And they just missed out in Austin, and they came home this week. And I think the best way to put the loss to Texas Tech at home on Tuesday was it was just kind of an encapsulation of everything we've seen this year. Porter Moser has talked so often about these stretches where they play well and they find themselves up just 4 and not 14. That was what that early part of that game felt like when Texas Tech opened with 10 turnovers in the first 11 minutes, and OU had a 2-point lead. So there was that. There's a team daring them to shoot and them going 9 of 33 from 3-point range. A night where Grant Sherfield is not on the top of his game, and they don't really have a second option. And then ultimately, you mentioned those final 5 minutes, they got just beaten down inside, where the Big 12's worst rebounding team struggled inside and on the offensive glass. And kind of it felt really familiar. And I think that's unfortunately just where this season's at now. I think we know where this team is. I don't know what's really left on the table for them. We can, I don't know what barring a run all the way through the Big 12 tournament and getting that automatic bid. I don't know what's there. And so they've got, they got to head to Iowa State tomorrow on Saturday. They head to Kansas State next week and then finish off at home with TCU. So it's not an easy ending either, with teams that themselves certainly have plenty to play for. So it's a tough spot, I think, right now. And they really were this close at Texas. They were, and who knows where we'd be if they'd gotten that win.
Porter Moser, of course, second year. We'll see what happens. I mean, he's got some talented freshmen too. That's the thing. He's got some talent. There's talent to build around. I think the key, you start thinking about offseason, I think the key is they need to get that big inside presence. I mean, it's been tough. You mentioned in the past, Tanner Groves asking him to play a little bit out of position. They need that inside presence. I think that's important. That's where it starts. So, but I really like the freshmen that they've gotten. And then there was some news this week about Bijan Cortez taking a break from basketball. Just can you talk a little bit about what Porter said about the situation?
Yeah, so about 2 hours before tip-off Tuesday, Bijan Cortez took to Twitter and he wrote, due to personal reasons, I'm taking some time away from basketball. I look forward to returning as soon as I can. So it's I think we haven't gotten a whole lot of details, but billed as a temporary a step away from basketball. And I said this on Twitter. I've worked it into my copy where I could. Not surely whatever Bijan Cortez is taken care of now is more important than basketball. Whether OU was trying to lock up a 1 seed or kind of where they are now, and so it's a really important step. And then to hear Porter Moser and Bijan's teammates talk about it after the game, it was kind of that same message. The players found out on Monday, so in between the 2 games. And Porter Moser just reading the quote now. My message to him is that I love him. We miss him in this program, and he'll be welcomed back with open arms. I mean, that's the proper message, and it's the way they're operating. Jalen Hill had a similar statement, and so we'll see. But this is a healthy step. I'm glad, I guess, as a greater sports culture and sports media and all that this is fortunately becomes something that's there's no stigma around, or fading stigma around in these days, and hopefully for Bijan all the very best.
Switching gears, let's talk some spring sports.
Diamond sports.
Let's go with baseball first, real quick. Opening part of the season, they got their first weekend done. They're entering. I mean, it's funny with baseball; they hit the ground running. They play some baseball games and they don't stop. So, I think from the record, it looks like they're just still trying to find themselves. It's early season. No reason to concern. I mean, we've seen this the last couple of years with Skip Johnson, but just early thoughts on what baseball's been doing.
Yeah, they're 2-3 right now. They opened with a win against Cal Baptist last Friday, and then dropped the next 2. Beat Air Force on Monday, and then Wednesday in Arlington. Took a loss to Abilene Christian, and so they're 2-3. And if you go on Twitter, you can find a lot of people who are ready to burn the house down, who clearly have short memories. Because if anyone watched the first couple months of OU baseball last year, that didn't show you a team that you thought was going to make a run to the College Baseball World Series Finals. And I think Skip Johnson's teams have shown a propensity for growing as they come. And this year's team, it was surely going to have to be this way, because I mean they had so much to replace. You don't lose I mean, it was a testament to how good last year's team was that 11 guys were drafted.
Yeah.
And they've appeared to have hit, I think, in some of the transfer portal additions, and Dakota Harris has kind of been that early star, and Cale Davis had a really good debut. He'll pitch tonight against Ryder. But it's early and it's a brand new team, and there's a lot to work out. So let's pump the brakes. It is February. Now, I'll ask you this, Eric. Is it time to hit the panic button for OU softball? I don't know, man. They took a loss in February. Have they lost it? That's my question for you. Have they lost it?
Oh, it's season's over. They didn't have a 38 game win streak to start this season. It's over. They only won 8 games in a row before losing a game. So no, we had a chance to talk to Patty Gasso this week, and it's almost like she went out of her way to say, hey, this team's going to lose games. There's nothing wrong with losing games. It's a 60 game schedule. And I think OU fans, they've just seen the dominating performances of this team. And in a way, I just wonder if losing an early season game takes a little bit of pressure off this year's squad, because last year, you think every time they went on the field, everyone, okay, that's 20 in a row. Okay, that's 30 in a row. That probably wears on you. And in a way, I just wonder if Patty Gasso's glad that this is out of the way, that everyone can focus on, the future. And she even mentioned they're going to California this weekend for the Mary Nutter Collegiate Classic, which is a big tournament. And she said they could lose 2 or 3 times this weekend, and that's okay. She just wants this team to get better. Now, of course, everyone's wondering, question marks about this team. Automatically, everyone looks at Jordy Ball, and she struggled. When I say struggled, the bar is set so high for her. If she has a bad outing, everyone thinks the sky's falling down. The Sooners lost with her in the circle against Baylor, down at Baylor, and she really just had one bad inning and really one bad pitch that led to a 3-run homer. But other than that, she's working through some things. You got to remember, she only played through 9 innings the last month of last season with an arm injury. She's still trying to find her way back. It was cute. One of my daughter's former softball teammates sent me a text saying, we need the blonde Jordy back, because of course Jordy's a brunette now. So OU fans are looking for anything to change to go back to last year, and it's just going to be a process with her. That being said, real quick, Nicole May, she's been excellent. She's thrown 15.1 innings, 15 and a third innings. She's only allowed 5 hits and 28 strikeouts. You wonder if she is currently being thought as the ace. Is she going to start against UCLA? Oklahoma fell to number 2. They play number 1 UCLA on Sunday. Will Nicole May be in the circle instead of Jordy Ball? We'll see what happens. Jordy Ball's really made a name for herself with an early season win last year against UCLA. So we'll see what happens there. Offensively, just need better at bats. Jordan Erickson, the freshman, was really impressive. She had 11 RBIs in one day, 8 in one game, and 4 home runs, lead the teams with 4 home runs. Patty Gasso wondered if she could handle college pitching, and she said she doubted it, and she's making Patty said she's making me wrong. She's out there playing well and hitting the ball, swinging the bat well. So. And then the normal suspects, they'll come around: Grace Lyons, Jada Coleman, Tiare Jennings. I think there's no reason to worry. But yeah, you'd think after that loss that it was the worst thing in the world, Eli. But that's just where Oklahoma softball is right now.
So what, they dropped from the top spot this week, right?
They are number 2 for the first time in 27 or 29 weeks. They are not number 1 in the nation.
That is stunning. It's more a testament to Patty Gasso and the success of this program than any kind of time to hit the panic button. I think, but a commonality between the two OU spring Diamond Sport teams, they schedule really tough early, and there's reason for that. And you see it. We see it all the time with OU softball. We saw it last year with OU baseball. These games are not what they're measured by, and certainly Patty Gasso and Skip Johnson are not measuring, I don't think, their team's success by February results. It's all about building this team up to where they peak at the end of the spring. And I think that's probably the message you'll hear from them both right about now.
Let's wrap this up with another number 1 team right now. Gymnastics, a big one.
Yeah.
And you had a chance to talk to some athletes. Just your thoughts on what's going to happen this weekend or tonight.
Well, tonight. Speaking of kind of like ramping up, so OU Gymnastics are 11-0. They host West Virginia tonight, and they're kind of in an interesting time in their season. KJ Kindler kind of breaks the season down into phases. January, as she puts it, is just kind of getting yourself back into it, routines, getting the feel for competition. February, conditioning, grinding in the gym. They've upped their practice schedule this month with the idea of when they hit the best time of the year, that the next month they have some huge meets with Florida and Michigan. And then you get to nationals, and obviously where they're going to be defending a national title. They've got to be strong, but they can't be training as hard as they are right now. So February, this past month, has just been all about the grind, about building up. And so I chatted with Jordan Bowers and Olivia Troutman about that, and just kind of what it's like for them to go from starting the season, and then this month has really been about building up, and it's a time for them to tinker with their routines. They, by virtue of practicing as much as they do, they've got a lot of scores to work from and a lot of things to tinker with, tweak, and all with the view of when they hit March and then April, that they are at peak form, they're conditioned, they're ready for those back-to-backs at the NCAAs, and so they've got another one tonight. But when they hit March, they've got Florida coming next week. That's 1 versus 2. They'll head to Michigan a few days later, 1 versus 3, and then it won't be long before it's Big 12s and nationals. So they're on their way to at least contending again for that ultimate prize.
That's perfect. Well, Eli, you did so well last week. I'm actually to wrap this up again, man.
I'll wrap this one up.
We'll make
Can I wrap it up with one, just a shameless plug? We've hit so much, but one little shameless plug here.
Yeah.
I did this week. I chatted with Joey Prada, who is on OU's wrestling team. He's 25 years old. We graduated in the same high school class, believe it or not. He's a 7th-year guy who's finishing out his career in the next few weeks, and just really fascinating to talk to him. I mean, he's been at this for a long time. There's been several. This is the second time he's going through his quote unquote final season. So he's getting a bit of a do-over. COVID shook things up in his career. So there's an interesting story today about a program we don't cover all the time, but a guy who has really been at this and is in the final stages. So you can find that at the Tulsa World. You can find all of our work, Eric, at tulsaworld.com, ousportsextra.com. Thank you for listening. You find us Google, Spotify, Apple, anywhere you get your podcast, tulsaworld.com. And we'll be back next week, won't we?
We'll be back.
Thanks for listening, guys.